Vince Wong, co-founder and COO of Electric Fish. Thanks so much for joining me. It's great to see you.
Yes, my pleasure, John.
So, Electric Fish, for those who don't know, was the winner of the 2023 startup competition at DISTRIBUTECH International, which we call Initiate. And that is obviously North America's largest utility event. And so a really great opportunity for us in the industry to see what's coming. And so we really love how much that program has grown. So on one hand, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you, Vince, about what has happened since that experience. Hopefully, what hand have we had in whatever growth that you've had in that year and a half since you participated? And lie to me if you need to say that we contributed to everything. And more broadly, I do want to dive into some of the joys and pains that come with scaling a startup in the kind of clean tech utility environment, which has a whole set of nuances to itself. Before we do that, do share a bit about what you're working on at Electric Fish and the origin story behind starting the company.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So, Electric Fish, we are a climate tech company that's been around for just over 4.5 years at this point. And our ultimate goal is to take a very different and more resilient approach to EV charging infrastructure. A lot of our genesis comes from one of my co-founders, Anurag's research experience from places like Oak Ridge National Lab and BMW and Michigan Tech, where he basically came upon this insight around, this is, over 5 years ago at this point, before we met, around all the EV charging that will need to be deployed, but also the impact on the grid that will have. And so, what we're doing, products has effectively not changed in about 4.5 years. We built battery integrated fast EV chargers that also double as microgrids that can provide meaningful backup power and energy for sites in the grid locally where our systems are deployed. Primarily focusing on fleet and government applications at the moment, but we've seen certainly interest from other areas, including public charging. And so when you think about the EV transition, most electrification, in general, the distribution grid and electric utilities really underpin the infrastructure, the meat of the infrastructure work. When you think about permitting, site surveys, approvals, sending in new service upgrades, authorizing some of the construction in some cases that needs to be done. So utilities are extremely critical stakeholders. And in the past, with other sorts of charging infrastructure approaches, it's been very burdensome on both ends, mostly because of the very significant grid constraints that we have. We built the grid in the US, at least, in some parts of the country over a century ago. And so it was never really intended for this mass scale of electrification that we have on our hands now, which we absolutely do need to accomplish if we are to hit our climate objectives and also just electric transitionary objectives. But we are faced now in this moment of having, vehicles deployed on lots, for instance, without the charging approved, worsening, environmental disasters due to things like climate change, wildfires, blizzards, the likes of which are growing more frequent and severe. And so as we think about the upfront challenges of deploying, our system is able to work very easily with the site's existing grid infrastructure for fast deployment. Through the battery integration that we've uniquely designed, it's able to keep energy costs low for those fleet operations. But then also it helps the fleet and even the site stay resilient, even in the case of a grid outage, prompted by any number of things. And so we hear a lot about reliability in the conversation around EVs. One area we think is not talked about enough is resilience. We think it's really going to be a big problem if we're not thinking about it systematically and thoughtfully. So those are some of the ways we're looking to support the industry, and already working with folks like the National Park Service, IBW, upcoming contracts to be delivered with folks like the Department of Defense. We feel really great about our impact.
So in the event of an outage, are you saying that the asset itself, the charger and the containerized battery, will be able to stay online because of that storage, or does that storage
Yeah.
asset extend to the like site operations? Or we're talking just about the charger?
Both. So it really depends on what the customer is interested in. Some fleets in particular don't really have the desire to use our system for site backup. They want to just keep in those, edge cases potentially, which are becoming less edgy, where the power is not available for the fleets. But like with the National Park Service and some other customers, we've actually provided backup to the site itself during both simulated and real grid outages. And so this is an area where having a flexible energy asset like ours, which actually can be very easily deployed and redeployed because of its containerized form factor, as you pointed out, makes it really compelling for folks like utilities who might want it in one location most of the year, during hurricane season or wildfire season, redeploy to another area to help service things like disaster response and recovery of systems with their increasingly electrifying fleets. So there is that flexibility, but it really depends on what they're prioritizing.
Well, and that was going to be my next question is like, how does the utility fit into your business? I know from like a market standpoint, they obviously do because they're delivering the power to your asset, but your customers so far, you mentioned the government and some fleet operators. Is this also a mobile battery play for, like utility fleets? Like I'm curious where they fit in and why maybe DISTRIBUTECH was such an interesting environment for you guys to be in.
Yeah, so we've gone over 4.5 years. We've gone through a lot of iterations in terms of who our ideal customer profile is, and I think by far and away, this fleet segment and sort of the government sectors have really emerged in terms of their demonstrated interest, whether through actual signed contracts for commercial sales, which we have, or LOIs, which are also really exciting. With utilities, as I mentioned, they are really critical stakeholders in the whole transition, and everything really is routed through them. And so initially, we were actually looking at utilities as one of our key customer segments. We still are very interested in actually selling into utilities directly, but want to approach that as a phase 2, just given all the very urgent demand that we're seeing from other customers in other segments. But what DISTRIBUTECH really helped us achieve was validate this notion of what happens when this is deployed at scale. So I've so far talked about what the systems can do at a site level. We can unlock fast charging in very grid constrained locations in weeks instead of years. There's the backup capabilities to the site or even the grid feeder locally. But the idea that so resonated with utility participants and spectators at DISTRIBUTECH was this notion of when we actually have a critical mass in a utility service territory, we actually all of a sudden have a virtual power plant. So at a site level, you think about a distributed energy resource or DER. But when you actually have tens, hundreds of these units in one utility region, they can actually be interlinked digitally. And the idea that these are also flexible gives new life to what a VPP is possible or is capable of. Traditionally, VPPs are primarily predicated on stationary assets. But when you now have flexible, easily redeployable, not yet mobile, but very easily movable with just a forklift and flatbed, that changes the calculus for how utilities think about distribution, grid upgrades, and where they need to maybe invest more in overloaded circuits. And so utilities have been and continue to be really strong partners of ours. It has also helped to showcase our differentiation. One tangible example with Con Edison, they have this interconnection threshold of 50 kilowatts. If you're applying for an interconnection above, it's going to very easily take many months, if not over a year, to complete the initial sort of site survey and get permitting, if you're so lucky. There might not actually be a permit waiting for you at the end of that. If you're below 50 kilowatts, they have a 10 business day guaranteed response time. And so, we worked really closely with Eric Davis on their innovation team. We actually had an existing relationship with him, but through DISTRIBUTECH. I've caught up with him extensively at both DISTRIBUTECHs that we've been to, and that's just the case with so many other utilities. Certainly domestically, but even internationally. Got to catch up with Curtis over at Electra, based out of Ontario. Just the sort of footprint. I got a quick sidebar with Paul Lau, CEO of SMUD. So just the types of recognition that DISTRIBUTECH brings in, certainly from utilities, but also from our other target segments, government, fleets. They were very well represented as well. There's one in the most recent DISTRIBUTECH that we attended in Orlando this year. I won't name the customer just yet because we're still finalizing, hopefully the initial contract. But they stopped by our booth. We were, it was basically the end of one of the days, and they stopped by. That conversation led to a discussion with our technical team, and we've since filled out an RFI, sent them a lot of just performance data of how this could look like at one of their fleet depots. And we're now currently, they came over to our manufacturing facility here in the Bay Area. So we're really cooking here with a lot of these DISTRIBUTECH originated leads. And that's not even to say anything about just the recognition that it's garnered us. So obviously winning Initiate was really exciting last year. That got us the booth as for this year as an award winner. One of my co-founders, Anurag, is actually on the DISTRIBUTECH planning committee. He was on the EV committee this past cycle. We're really excited for Dallas next year already and beginning to cook up what that looks like in terms of how we show up in full force. But, I would say just within the utility ecosystem, it really helped to propel our presence. And again, just going back to this point, like because utilities underpin everything electrification, people look to the utilities, even if the utilities aren't buying. It's the fact that they have, they advocate, they find that it's easier to deploy with, in Con Edison example, very tangibly. So our other target customers look to that as social proof in a way. And so all this combined has really helped to accelerate some of the key business development, but also just product developments that we've had over the past year and a half.
That's great. That's great insight. So I do want to get into some of the more technical stuff too. So you were Sure. mentioning the virtual power plant opportunity, which kind of sparked an idea in my head. Are you participating in electricity markets when otherwise normal conditions and the battery is full and doing any kind of arbitraging? Like, is that another revenue stream for you?
Absolutely. And this is something that gets some of our customers excited. Again, some customers just care about their EV operations and don't want to touch any of that. But there's others that this is very compelling for. And luckily, a number of these wholesale markets are propping up in increasing numbers of states for longer windows throughout the year with ever more lucrative compensation schemes as well. And so we've already done this with Con Edison. We are in early to mid explorations, the stage explorations with some other utilities about some of their regions. In Con Ed, what we specifically participated in was demand response, where instead of pulling from the grid, we just pulled from our own battery storage during the peaky summer events where we were called. And we actually generated in excess of $10,000 just by participating in 3 different events last summer. And so on the single system, charger. And so, we can extrapolate that to multiple units, multiple locations, jurisdictions, utility territories. Ones we're looking out for elsewhere, are ones where you actually send energy back through to the grid feeder. We've done that in pilot demonstration mode, but to actually get compensated, we have a number of DER aggregator partners, including Leap, that help us facilitate some of these interactions with the grid. And we have our own, in-house software as well, which helps to facilitate all of this.
Awesome. Super interesting stuff. So I mentioned wanting to get into the challenges that come along the way. We know that being in the startup life is not easy. I've heard that having one that targets this industry, and maybe you're not as exposed to it given that utilities aren't the only and core customer here. I've heard that piece is especially hard to break through just due to barriers for entry. But
Yeah.
What's the experience been like for you guys, and maybe some of those milestone moments that you can call out in terms of, I know you have those make or break kind of checkpoints along the way.
We're this, humble yet mighty startup trying to accomplish a grand vision. We are not immune to macroeconomic conditions. So, there were times when we were trying to fundraise during when the Ukraine invasion happened, and the energy markets went into tailspin, and that has nothing to do with us individually, but that was something that actually had investors kind of spooked for a bit, just across energy markets generally. If you remember the supply chain crises with the Suez Canal, that actually impacted us, where we had one supplier quote us initially 6 weeks, and that went up to 6 months. So we just scrambled for another one, which we thankfully were able to do back in 2021 and 2020 when that was happening. Certainly we were founded just before the pandemic, and so our first whole year and a half, more or less, was really challenging, just getting the initial team off the ground, the company, the product. With like a company like us, which is an infrastructure company leveraging both cutting edge hardware and software, it becomes really hard to collaborate when you are sheltering in place, right? Obviously we had to, it made sense, but just in terms of some of our challenges, we've seen a lot. I would say additionally, we're a very globally diverse team. We're 4 co-founders, total team of 12, but 4 founders from 4 continents. So we've got the U.S. in North America with me. We've got India, Nigeria, and Brazil, rounding out my 3 other co-founders. And so that's really great in terms of reflecting the global ambition of our vision. But at the same time, visas. I individually had to manage the visa securing process for each of the 3. And so I learned a lot through that, and I've actually shared all my notes with various founder friends now going through similar. So there's just a whole host of challenges that maybe aren't immediately obvious, but which we've navigated successfully. And I think it's in large part due to the resilience of our own team. We've learned so much at each of these junctures. And last month we announced the launch of our state-of-the-art 8,000 square foot manufacturing facility. So this is funded by the California Energy Commission. We won a $1.7 million grant, which we actually announced at DISTRIBUTECH. I think that was the first public forum where we actually talked about it. But it took a little, after a little bit of while of contracting and execution, we're finally, getting that underway. So we're really excited about, producing the first commercial units from this facility, and sending them to customers like the Department of Defense, which we're really excited about. So yeah, all that to say, like any startup, our journey has not been linear by any means, but it has made us stronger, and we've learned a lot along the way, which we also try to pay forward where we can.
Awesome. Vince Wong, Electric Fish, thanks so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see you guys in Dallas.
Yeah, we're super stoked for Dallas, and it'll be here before we know it.